I put the truck in park and killed the engine, taking a moment to stretch my legs after the long drive up the mountain. The Forestry Service truck had handled the winding dirt road better than I'd expected, though my back was still complaining from the 3-hour journey. The lookout tower stood against the clear blue Montana sky like something from another era. 4 stories of weathered wood with a glass-enclosed observation room at the top, perched on the edge of a cliff that gave a perfect view of miles of wilderness, my home for the next 5 months. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat and climbed out, breathing in the clean mountain air. The scent of pine was everywhere, and the silence was broken only by the sound of birds and the wind rustling through the trees. After months of city noise and apartment living, the quiet felt almost unnatural. A second Forestry Service truck was parked nearby, and as I approached the base of the tower, a man emerged from the doorway. He walked toward me with the unhurried gait of someone who'd spent decades in these mountains. "You must be Jerry Juarez," he said, extending his hand. "Charles Lewis. Most folks call me Rob." I shook his hand. "Nice to meet you. Everyone calls me Jerry." Rob was a weathered man in his 50s wearing a Forest Service uniform that had seen better days. Deep lines around his eyes suggested years squinting against the sun, scanning these same forests I'd be watching. "Let's get you settled in and go through the basics," he said, leading me toward the tower. "Not much to it, but there are some things you need to know." The wooden stairs creaked under our weight as we climbed. The main living quarters were simple but comfortable. A small kitchen area, a bathroom with a shower, a bed, and some basic furniture. Large windows offered views in every direction. "Living space is down here," Rob explained. "Observation deck is up top. That's where you'll spend most of your working hours." We climbed another flight of stairs to the top level, a glass-enclosed room with a 360-degree view of the surrounding wilderness. The vista was breathtaking. Miles of dense forest, rolling mountains, and valleys stretching to the horizon. "This is where the magic happens," Rob said, gesturing around the room. "Your job is simple. Watch for smoke, report fires, track lightning strikes during storms. You'll do regular radio check-ins 3 times a day." He walked me through the equipment, binoculars, maps, weather instruments, and the radio system. It was all straightforward stuff, exactly what I'd been trained for during orientation. "Radio works on these channels," Rob said, showing me the different frequencies. "Channel 1 is for routine reports. Channel 2 is for emergencies. Channel 3 connects to other lookouts in the region if you need to coordinate." I nodded, taking it all in. The job itself wasn't complicated. That's partly why I'd taken it. After years of working construction in Boise with people constantly around me, I was looking forward to some solitude. "Got it," I said. "Seems simple enough." Rob's expression changed slightly. "There's one more thing we need to go over." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me, and I opened it to find a typed list of 6 rules. "Safety protocols," he said, his tone suddenly more serious. "Specific to this tower." I read through the list, my confusion growing with each item. 1. Do not respond to radio calls after 9 p.m., regardless of who is calling or what they say. 2. If you hear footsteps on the stairs after dark, turn on the exterior floodlights immediately. 3. Do not look at the mountains between midnight and 5:01 a.m. 4. If you hear knocking at the door in sets of 3, stay away from all doors and windows until morning. 5. Never go outside during thunderstorms, no matter how strong the urge. 6. If you see someone who looks like me or any other person you know approaching the tower, hide immediately and do not reveal yourself until dawn. I looked up from the paper, waiting for Rob to crack a smile or tell me it was some kind of joke, but his expression remained deadly serious. "You're kidding, right?" I asked. "This has got to be some kind of initiation thing for the new guy." Rob shook his head. "I wish I was kidding, Jerry, but every single rule on that list is there for a reason." What reason could there possibly be for not looking at mountains after midnight? That's literally the job, looking at the forest. The job is spotting fires, he corrected me. And you won't see any fires by looking at the mountain peaks at night. I folded the paper and handed it back to him. Look, I appreciate a good joke, but it's not a joke, Rob cut me off, pushing the paper back toward me. In the last 10 years, we've had 8 lookouts at this tower. 3 quit within their first month. 2 more left before the season ended. The other 3, he paused, his eyes holding mine. The other 3 vanished. A chill ran through me despite the warm air in the tower. Vanished? What do you mean, vanished? I mean they disappeared without a trace. No personal belongings taken, vehicles still parked outside, no distress calls, just gone. Rob tapped the paper in my hand. The ones who made it, they followed these rules. I stared at him, trying to figure out if this was some elaborate prank, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of weary seriousness that was hard to fake. So what exactly am I supposed to be afraid of out here? I asked. Bears? Mountain lions? Rob looked out the window at the vast expanse of wilderness. I can't tell you exactly what's out there. All I know is that these mountains are old, really old, and not everything that lives in them wants us here. Now I was sure he was messing with me. Right. So what? Forest ghosts? Bigfoot? Aliens? Make jokes if you want, Rob said, not taking the bait. But keep that list somewhere you can see it. And follow those rules, especially after dark. He spent another hour going through practical matters, where supplies were kept, how to file reports, emergency procedures, all normal stuff that made the weird list of rules seem even more out of place. Before he left, Rob paused at the door. I'll be back in a week to check on you. Radio in if you need anything before then, during daylight hours. He gave me a meaningful look. And Jerry, I'm serious about those rules. Your life might depend on them. After he drove away, I sat in the observation room, the list of rules in my hand. Part of me wondered if I should call the main office and ask if my supervisor was known for playing pranks on newcomers. But another part of me couldn't shake the seriousness in Rob's voice. I tacked the list to the bulletin board more as a curiosity than anything else. Whatever game Rob was playing, I figured I'd humor him for now. After all, I had 5 months of solitude ahead of me. Might as well have something to laugh about. The first few days passed exactly as expected. I settled into a routine. Wake up at sunrise, make coffee, scan the forest for smoke, report in by radio, read books, make meals, repeat the process. The sunsets were spectacular from the tower, painting the sky in colors I'd never seen in the city. By the 4th day, I'd almost forgotten about the strange list of rules. Nothing unusual had happened. No mysterious radio calls after dark, no footsteps on the stairs, no urges to go wandering during storms. The isolation was exactly what I'd signed up for, and I was enjoying the peace and quiet. At night, I'd sit out on the small deck with a beer, looking at the stars and listening to the sounds of the forest. Sometimes I'd hear owls calling or the distant howl of wolves. It was peaceful in a way city life never could be. By the end of the first week, I'd settled into a comfortable routine. The list of rules still hung on the bulletin board, but I'd stopped giving it more than a passing glance. Whatever had spooked previous lookouts, if there had even been any issues at all, it clearly wasn't anything I needed to worry about. I figured Rob had either been testing me, hazing the new guy, or maybe he actually believed the superstitious nonsense he'd shared. Either way, as I sat in the observation room on my 7th night, watching the sun set over the mountains, I felt completely at ease in my isolated perch. The rules seemed like complete nonsense now, just a strange footnote to an otherwise straightforward job. I had my feet propped up on the desk, a dog-eared paperback in my hands. The tower's silence had become comfortable over the past week, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden structure or the soft hum of the small refrigerator. My flashlight cast a warm circle of light across the pages of my book, some thriller I'd picked up at the last gas station before heading up the mountain. The radio crackled to life with a burst of static that made me jump. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, I need help." I lowered my book, staring at the radio. The voice sounded young, maybe a hiker in his 20s. Scared. "I'm lost near one of the lookout towers. I think I can see lights. Please, if anyone's there." My eyes flicked to the small digital clock on the desk. 9:47. Rule 1. No radio responses after 9 p.m. I set my book down and moved closer to the radio, my hand hovering over the transmit button. The voice came again, more desperate. "Please, my leg is hurt. I can't make it much farther. I can see your tower lights. Just tell me if I'm going the right way." I bit my lip, fingers inches from the button. What kind of person ignores someone in trouble? Rob's warning seemed ridiculous in the face of someone actually needing help. The rules were probably just to scare new lookouts, some kind of Forest Service hazing ritual. "It's getting darker. I think I hear something moving in the trees. Please answer me." My hand pulled back. I remembered what Rob had said about the previous lookouts. 3 had disappeared. Those who followed the rules survived. But this was a real person. I could hear the pain in his voice, the rising panic. "I'm begging you. Just say something so I know which direction to go." I sat there listening to the voice plead for help. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. The voice grew more frantic, describing sounds in the forest, begging me to respond, to send help, to do anything. "Please. I think something's following me now. I can hear it moving through the trees." My stomach twisted with guilt. What if this was legitimate? What if someone was actually hurt out there, and I was letting them die because of some stupid rules on a piece of paper? "Oh God, it's getting closer. Please help me." The voice broke into sobs. I gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, forcing myself to stay put. After about 20 minutes, the voice went quiet. The radio fell silent, leaving only the soft static of an open channel. I waited for more, but nothing came. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about the voice, imagining some poor hiker being dragged away into the forest while I sat safe in my tower. I'd chosen the rules over a human life. The guilt gnawed at me until dawn broke. When morning finally came, I dragged myself out of bed and went straight to the radio to check if there had been any more transmissions. I needed to report the incident, call for a search party, something. That's when I noticed it. The power cord for the radio hung loose from the back of the unit, completely disconnected from the wall. I stared at the unplugged cord, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. I distinctly remembered using the radio for my evening check-in. I hadn't touched it after that. The radio had been unplugged all night. Whatever voice I'd heard begging for help couldn't possibly have come through the actual radio. My hands shook as I plugged the cord back in. The radio powered up with its familiar hum and green indicator light. I picked up the handset and made my morning report, trying to keep my voice steady as I relayed weather conditions and fire risk assessments. I said nothing about the night before. After signing off, I pulled the rule list from the drawer where I'd stashed it. I read through each item carefully, no longer dismissing them as paranoid nonsense. I placed the paper back on my desk, weighing it down with my coffee mug where I could see it. The next 2 days, I followed every rule to the letter. I made my reports on schedule, never touched the radio after 9, and kept my eyes away from the windows during the specified hours. I jumped at every sound, constantly checking that the floodlights were working properly. On the second night, I was trying to read again but couldn't focus on the words. Around 11:30, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs outside. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate steps coming up toward the cabin. My heart raced as I scrambled to the light panel. Rule 2. Turn on exterior floodlights if hearing footsteps on the stairs after dark. I slapped the switch, flooding the area around the tower with harsh white light. The footsteps stopped immediately. For several long seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, the footsteps resumed, moving downward this time, retreating back down the stairs. Whatever had been coming up had turned around. I stood frozen by the light panel, listening as the steps faded away. My breathing came in short, shallow gasps. I stayed there for what felt like hours, afraid to move away from the lights. I kept every floodlight blazing until the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon. I was too scared to turn them off, too terrified to even consider what might have happened if I hadn't remembered the rule. I yawned and stretched, feeling the fatigue of another long day of watching empty horizons. After my evening radio check-in, I'd settled into my usual routine, reading, jotting notes in my journal, and occasionally scanning the tree line out of habit. The clock on the wall showed it was almost midnight, and I realized I'd lost track of time. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. I stood up to make a fresh cup, rubbing my eyes as I moved to the kitchenette. While waiting for the water to boil, I leaned against the counter and gazed absently out the windows. That's when I noticed the mountains. At first, I didn't register anything unusual, just the familiar silhouettes against the night sky. Then something caught my attention. A slight movement? I blinked, thinking my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. The peaks looked wrong. Not just strange or different, fundamentally wrong. The outlines seemed to shift and flow like liquid, the solid rock formations rippling as if made of cloth caught in a breeze. One peak stretched upward, elongating impossibly before settling back into a new shape entirely different from its original form. I checked the time again. Midnight, exactly. Rule 3 flashed in my mind. Do not look at the mountains between midnight and 5 a.m. I should have looked away immediately. Instead, I stepped closer to the window, drawn by a strange compulsion I couldn't explain. The mountains continued their impossible dance, peaks flowing into valleys and back again. New formations rose where none had existed before, while others sank as if being absorbed back into the earth. Something about the movement was mesmerizing, almost beautiful in its fluid impossibility. I felt an urge to keep watching, to understand the pattern. My hand reached for the window glass. A sharp pain jolted through my head, like an ice pick behind my eyes. I gasped and stumbled backward, finally breaking my gaze away. "What the hell?" I whispered, heart pounding. The kettle whistled behind me, making me jump. I turned off the stove but left the water untouched. My hands were shaking too. I turned off the stove but left the water untouched. My hands were shaking too badly to trust myself with boiling water. I needed to focus on following the rules now. With deliberate movements, I positioned my chair to face the interior wall, putting my back to all windows. The urge to turn around and look at the mountains again pulled at me like a physical tether. It wasn't simple curiosity. It felt like something was calling to me specifically, trying to draw me back to the window. "No," I said aloud to the empty room, my voice sounding thin. "Not doing that." I grabbed my paperback and tried to read, but the words blurred together. Every few minutes, I caught myself starting to turn around. Each time, I had to consciously force my body to stay put. I even considered blindfolding myself, but worried that might make me more vulnerable if something else happened. The night stretched endlessly. I counted seconds, then minutes, fighting the compulsion that grew stronger as time passed. My neck muscles ached from the tension of resisting the pull. At one point, I actually got up and moved to the bathroom, as far from the windows as possible in the small tower cabin. When the first light of dawn finally appeared, I felt it before I saw it, a subtle lifting of the pressure in my mind. I checked my watch, 5:07 a.m. Only then did I allow myself to turn around. The mountains looked completely normal, Solid, immobile rock formations exactly where they'd always been. No evidence remained of the impossible movements I'd witnessed, yet the memory stayed vivid in my mind. I made a note on the rule sheet and taped it directly to the window. Rule 3 is real. Don't look at night. Almost a week passed without incident. I'd been religious about following the rules, especially after what I'd seen with the mountains. The radio incident and the footsteps on the stairs had been terrifying, but somehow the shifting mountains affected me more deeply, maybe because I'd been drawn to keep looking despite the danger. I was washing my dinner dishes when I heard it. A knock at the door. 3 distinct raps, evenly spaced. I froze, water dripping from my hands. 3 more knocks followed, in exactly the same rhythm. Then again, and again. Rule 4 flashed in my mind. Stay away from doors and windows if hearing 3 knock patterns. I shut off the water and backed away from the sink, which was unfortunately close to the door. The knocking continued, perfectly timed sets of 3. Not urgent or aggressive, just steady, patient, as if whoever or whatever was outside had all the time in the world. My first instinct was to call out, ask who was there, but something told me that would be a terrible mistake. Instead, I retreated to the center of the room, sitting on the edge of my cot. The knocking continued, never varying in pace or intensity. After 20 minutes, I started to wonder if it might be a branch hitting the door in the wind. But there was no wind tonight. The trees outside were perfectly still, and the rhythm was too precise, too deliberate. 30 minutes became 45, then an hour. The knocking never stopped or slowed. I stayed put, fighting the urge to answer, to make it stop, to see what was on the other side. My hands were clenched so tight my fingernails left marks in my palms. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The silence felt more threatening than the noise had been. I stayed frozen in place, straining to hear any sound from outside. Nothing. After another 15 minutes of silence, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly, though I remained in the center of the room until morning. When dawn broke, I cautiously approached the door. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then I noticed them. 3 deep gouges in the wood, running diagonally across the door's surface. They weren't there the day before. I was certain of it. I ran my fingers along the marks. They were deep, as if made by something with tremendous strength. Whatever had been knocking hadn't been using knuckles. I took several photos with my phone, then reinforced the door's lock with the small tool set I'd brought. It wouldn't stop anything truly determined to get in, but it made me feel marginally better. The following week brought a massive thunderstorm. I'd seen the system developing on the weather radar and battened down everything according to protocol. The rain came first, hammering against the tower windows like tiny bullets. Lightning followed, splitting the sky with brilliant forks that momentarily turned night to day. I sat at my desk, recording wind speeds and rainfall amounts, when a particularly close lightning strike illuminated the entire forest. In that brief flash, I thought I saw something moving between the trees, something large. The thunder that followed rattled the whole tower. As it faded, another sound replaced it, a low melodic humming that seemed to be coming from outside. It rose and fell with the wind, almost like singing. A sudden, overwhelming urge to go outside washed over me. I needed to see what was making that sound. I needed to feel the rain on my skin. I needed to walk into the forest right now. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I was halfway to the door when Rule 5 surfaced in my thoughts. Never go outside during thunderstorms. I stopped, my hand already reaching for the doorknob. The compulsion to open the door was nearly irresistible. My fingers brushed the metal handle. "No," I said through gritted teeth, forcing myself to remember Rob's warnings. "This isn't right." With tremendous effort, I pulled my hand back and stumbled away from the door. The humming outside grew louder, more insistent. The urge to go out intensified until I was physically shaking with the effort of resisting it. I retreated to my cot and covered my ears, but the humming seemed to bypass my ears entirely, resonating directly in my bones. I started reciting the rules out loud, over and over, focusing on each word to block out the call from outside. The storm raged all night. So did the battle in my mind. When morning finally came, the skies cleared as if nothing had happened. The humming stopped, and with it, the compulsion to go outside. Exhausted but relieved, I went out onto the observation deck to assess any storm damage. That's when I saw them. Huge claw marks scoring the exterior walls of the tower. They started near the ground and raked upward, as if something massive had tried to climb up to reach me. Some of the gouges were inches deep in the wooden siding. Whatever had been calling me to come outside last night hadn't been planning a friendly meeting. If I'd opened that door... I ran my fingers over one of the marks, feeling the splintered wood. The claw that made this would have been bigger than my hand. I swallowed hard and went back inside, checking and double-checking that the door was securely locked behind me. I woke with a jolt, my neck stiff from falling asleep at the desk. The logbook lay open beneath my cheek, a small patch of drool darkening the corner of the page. The lamp cast a dim circle of light that barely reached the walls of the tower cabin. I rubbed my eyes and checked my watch, just past 1 a.m. A sound from below made me freeze, the distinct metallic click of the tower door latch opening. My heart jumped into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not at this hour. Not without radio contact first. Footsteps began climbing the stairs. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the wooden floorboards. Each one sent vibrations through the structure, getting closer. Rule 6 flashed in my mind. Hide from unannounced Forest Service employee visits until daylight. I moved quickly but quietly, crossing to the small supply closet in 3 steps. I slipped inside among the cleaning supplies, emergency equipment, and extra blankets, pulling the slatted door closed just as the footsteps reached the top landing. The main door to the cabin swung open. Through the narrow gaps in the closet door, I watched as a figure stepped inside. It was Rob, or at least it looked exactly like Rob. Same weathered face, same Forest Service uniform, same build and height, but something was deeply wrong. This Rob moved with a strange fluidity, each motion too smooth, too continuous, like someone had removed the natural hitches and pauses in human movement. His head turned in a single unbroken sweep as he scanned the room. When the beam of his flashlight crossed the closet, I caught a glimpse of his eyes. They flashed with an animal-like reflection, a greenish-yellow glow that no human eyes should produce. I pressed myself deeper into the closet, trying to control my breathing as the thing that wasn't Rob began methodically searching the cabin. It checked under the desk, behind the radio equipment, and in the small bathroom. Its movements were precise but unnatural, as if it were performing actions it had seen but never truly understood. The fake Rob paused at my logbook, running fingers over the still damp spot where I'd been drooling. It lifted its hand, examining the moisture with that too smooth head tilt. Then it turned toward the closet. I held my breath as it approached, those wrong eyes sweeping back and forth. It stopped directly in front of my hiding spot, close enough that I could smell something odd, like wet leaves and copper. Not Rob's usual coffee and pine scent. The creature stood motionless for what felt like several minutes, its face just inches from the slatted door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My legs cramped painfully from maintaining my awkward crouch among the supplies. Finally, it turned away, moving toward the windows where it stared out at the dark mountains for a long moment. Then, without a word or sound, it walked back to the door, opened it, and left. I heard those same measured footsteps descending the stairs, then the click of the tower door closing. I stayed hidden, curled up in that closet until the first gray light of dawn filtered through the windows. My body ached from holding the same position for hours, but terror had kept me frozen in place. Even after sunrise, I emerged cautiously, checking every corner of the cabin before accepting I was truly alone. Hours later, I heard a vehicle approaching. I grabbed the binoculars and confirmed it was the real Forest Service truck, Rob's truck, coming up the access road for our scheduled weekly check-in. When he entered the cabin, I must have looked like hell. Rob took one look at me and frowned. "Something happened," he said. It wasn't a question. I told him everything. The midnight visitor, the two smooth movements, the reflective eyes, how it looked exactly like him, but moved all wrong. Rob nodded, his expression grim but unsurprised. "There's something in the forest that can take shapes," he said, sitting down heavily at the table. "Human shapes. We don't know what it is, but it's been here longer than the tower, longer than the Forest Service." "It looked exactly like you," I said. "That's why Rule 6 exists. They can copy appearances, but they can't mimic human behavior perfectly, and they can't stand daylight." Rob rubbed his face. "Look, Marcus, I wouldn't blame you if you wanted out. Nobody would. You've seen more in a few weeks than most lookouts ever do. I can have someone up here to replace you by tomorrow." I stared at him, the offer of escape hanging between us. "You don't have to decide right now," Rob added. "But after seeing that thing, well, most people choose to leave." I looked at Rob, who waited patiently for my answer. The clipboard sat on the desk between us, the transfer paperwork ready if I wanted out. "I'm staying," I said. Rob's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You sure about that? After what you saw last night?" "Yeah." I rubbed my eyes, still tired from my night in the closet. "Look, when you first told me about these rules, I thought it was all bullshit. Some kind of hazing ritual or test. But every single one of them has protected me from something real." I pulled the folded paper from my pocket and smoothed it on my knee. The creases were deep now, the paper soft from handling. The radio that shouldn't have worked, the footsteps on the stairs, the mountains, moving. I swallowed hard, remembering how they'd seemed to reach for me. The knocking, the storm, and now whatever that thing was pretending to be you. Each rule kept me alive. Rob nodded slowly, a hint of respect crossing his weathered face. "Most people don't figure that out until it's too late. They think the rules are suggestions, or that breaking one won't matter." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Let me be crystal clear. Strict rule following is the only way to stay alive up here. No exceptions, no matter what you see or hear." "I get it now." I folded the paper and returned it to my pocket. Rob stood and collected his clipboard. "I'll come back in 2 weeks with the supply truck. Call if you need anything before then, during daylight hours only." After he left, I spent the day scanning the horizon, checking for smoke, and recording weather data. The routine felt almost comforting after the previous night's terror. When darkness fell, I locked the door, closed the blinds, and tried to read, though my eyes kept drifting to the windows. The first footstep came just after midnight. It wasn't like before, a single set climbing the stairs. This was multiple footfalls circling the tower, some light and quick, others heavy and dragging. They moved around and around, never in sync, like several creatures patrolling. I moved to the light switch and flipped on the exterior floodlights. Rule 2 had worked before. The footsteps paused momentarily, then continued. My stomach dropped. This was new. They should have retreated like last time. The radio on my desk clicked on by itself, static hissing through the speaker. Then a voice cut through. My mother's voice. "Marcus? Honey, can you hear me? I need help. Please come outside." I froze. My mother lived 2 states away. She didn't know where I was. The voice changed. My brother Tom. "Marcus, what the hell? Turn off those lights, man. You're making it angry." Then my college roommate, my ex-girlfriend. people I hadn't spoken to in years. Finally, Rob's voice came through clear as day. "Marcus, this is Rob. Emergency situation. Turn off the lights and open the door immediately." That's an order. I backed away from the radio, which shouldn't even work at this hour. Rule 1. No radio responses after 9 p.m. 3 sharp knocks hit the main door. Then the back door. Then every door and window simultaneously, the same 3-knock pattern echoing from all sides. I moved to the center of the room, following Rule 4. Stay away from doors and windows when you hear the 3-knock pattern. My hands were shaking as the knocking intensified, becoming a coordinated assault of sound. The radio voices continued overlapping, pleading, threatening, begging me to come outside or turn off the lights. I sat on the floor, back against the bed frame, and waited. Hours passed. The voices grew more desperate, the knocking more violent. Around 3 in the morning, something massive slammed against the side of the tower. The whole structure shook, books falling from shelves, my coffee mug sliding off the desk and shattering. Another impact hit the opposite side, making the tower sway like it might topple. Against my better judgment, I looked toward the windows. Through gaps in the blinds, I caught glimpses of movement among the trees. Massive shadows shifted between trunks, too large for bears, too fluid for anything natural. One shadow rose up, stretching impossibly tall against the night sky. The impacts continued, the tower groaning under each blow. I stayed put, clutching the rules in my pocket, eyes fixed on the center of the room. Not the windows, not the doors. Just breathe and wait. The radio voices became garbled, inhuman sounds replacing the familiar tones. The knocking developed odd rhythms, no longer mimicking human patterns. I didn't move, didn't respond, didn't look. When the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, everything stopped at once. The knocking ceased mid-pattern. The radio clicked off. The footsteps disappeared. The impacts against the tower halted. Silence fell so completely it seemed like the night's events might have been a nightmare. I completed the remainder of fire season by following every single rule with religious precision. After my close call with the coordinated assault, I left nothing to chance. Each night before sunset, I checked and rechecked all windows, ensuring blinds were completely drawn from midnight to 5. I kept the rules paper on my desk at all times, no longer tucked away in a drawer or pocket where I might forget its importance. I memorized each instruction until they became as natural as breathing. The routine became almost comforting in its predictability. Morning coffee and horizon scanning, weather data recording, radio check-ins at exactly 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., never a minute later. No responses after 9, no matter what voices came through. I learned to ignore the occasional scratching on the door, the whispered conversations outside my windows, and the strange shadows that sometimes appeared to stretch toward the tower when the sun set at odd angles. When footsteps came in the night, and they did, with increasing frequency as summer waned, I hit the floodlight switch without hesitation. Sometimes they retreated immediately. Other times they circled for hours, testing my resolve. I stayed centered in the room, back against the bed frame, and waited them out. I never looked at the mountains after dark. I never stepped outside during storms. I hid in the closet whenever I heard unexpected visitors. The incidents increased as August faded into September. What started as isolated occurrences became near-nightly events. The knocking came more frequently, always in sets of 3, sometimes continuing for hours. The radio would crackle with voices of people I knew. My mother, old friends, co-workers, all claiming to need help, all after 9 p.m. I learned to turn the volume down without turning it off completely, just in case a legitimate emergency call came through during daylight hours. October brought the first snowfall, dusting the mountaintops with white. The temperature dropped sharply at night, and I layered blankets on my cot. The incidents decreased with the cold, as though whatever lurked out there preferred the warmer months. My twice-daily reports became routine. Tower 7, all clear, no smoke. The Forest Service rarely responded beyond acknowledgement. By late October, the trees had lost most of their leaves, making visibility better, but the landscape starker. The supply truck came less frequently as the season wound down, and I rationed my food carefully, knowing the tower would close soon for winter. When Rob's blue Forest Service truck appeared on the winding road below one crisp November morning, I knew it was time. I packed my few belongings neatly in my duffel bag and did a final sweep of the tower, making sure everything was in order. The rules paper remained on the desk. I had no need to take it with me. Its warnings were permanently etched into my memory. Rob climbed the metal stairs with the familiar human gait I'd learned to recognize. His knock was 4 quick raps, not the measured 3 that signaled danger. I opened the door to find him bundled in a heavy coat, his breath visible in the cold air. "Jerry," he said with a genuine smile, "you made it." "Whole season," I confirmed, stepping aside to let him in. Rob surveyed the tower, noting the neat organization, the spotless surfaces, the properly stored equipment. "You're the first in 5 years to finish a complete season," he said, removing his gloves and rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Most don't last a month." I thought about the night of the coordinated assault, how close I'd come to breaking. "I understand why." Rob nodded toward the rules paper on the desk. "I see you kept that handy. Saved my life more than once." We spent the morning shutting down the tower for winter. Rob showed me how to drain the water lines to prevent freezing, how to properly store the weather equipment, and how to secure the windows against the heavy snows that would come. We covered the furniture with sheets and packed away anything that might attract animals during the long winter months. As we carried the last box down to his truck, Rob cleared his throat. "The service wants me to offer you the position again for next summer, with a substantial pay increase." I paused, 1 foot on the metal step. "How substantial?" 50% more than this season. Good money for 3 months of work." I resumed walking, considering the offer. The dangers were obvious. I'd faced them almost nightly for months. But the money was good, and there was something about the solitude I'd grown to value. Away from the noise and demands of everyday life, I'd found a strange kind of peace up here, even with the threats that lurked in the darkness. We loaded the final box into Rob's truck, and I tossed my duffel bag onto the passenger seat. The tower stood tall and empty behind us, windows reflecting the pale November sun. "I'll take it," I said finally. Rob looked surprised but pleased. "You sure? After everything you've seen, I know what to expect now, and I know the rules work." He nodded slowly. "That they do." I glanced back at the tower once more before getting into the truck. "But I want you to tell me the truth, Rob. The complete truth about what's out there." Rob was quiet for a long moment as he started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, heater blowing cold air that would soon warm. "They were here long before us," he said finally, putting the truck in gear and beginning the slow descent down the mountain road. "Ancient things that existed in this forest before humans ever set foot here." "What are they?" "I don't know exactly. No one does. But they view these towers as intrusions into their territory. Each rule..." He paused, carefully navigating a sharp turn. Each rule was specifically designed to counter particular tricks or attack methods they use. The radio voices? They can mimic anyone they've heard. That's why we never respond after 9. They listen during the day, learn our voices, then use them against us at night. And the knocking? An invitation. If you acknowledge it, you're inviting them in. The mountains at night, the storms, the false rangers, all different aspects of the same entities, different ways they try to get to lookouts. I thought about the strange shadows I'd seen during the coordinated assault. They can take physical form, sometimes, not often. It costs them something to do that, I think. That's why they prefer tricks, trying to get you to come outside or open the door voluntarily. The truck wound its way down the mountain, the tower now just a small silhouette against the sky behind us. Through the passenger window, I caught movement among the distant trees, tall shapes that didn't move like deer or bears, forms that seemed to bend at odd angles as they kept pace with the truck from a distance. I didn't point them out to Rob. I didn't need to. He knew they were there, watching us leave their territory temporarily. I knew I would return next summer, better equipped and fully aware of what lurked in these woods. The rules had transformed from mysterious guidelines into my personal survival manual. I understood now why Rob had been so insistent, why he'd made me memorize them before he left me alone that first day. For 3 months, I'd lived alongside ancient, hostile entities, separated from them by nothing more than wooden walls and 6 simple rules. And somehow, I'd survived.